Salgado is serving a life sentence on the charge of second-degree murder, having been sentenced on February the 1st of 1996. Mr. Silva, is that information accurate?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Silva, your case has been assigned to Ms. Bonnie Jackson. Ms. Jackson will begin our interview process. Would you please answer any questions she might have?
Yes, sir.
Good morning, Mr. Silva.
Good morning, Ms. Jackson.
I'm fighting back a sneeze, so give me a moment, okay?
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Silva, you're 48 years old?
47.
That's right, 47. You served approximately 29 years on this offense, is that correct?
A little bit under 28. A little bit under 28 years.
Okay, approximately 28. And at the time of the offense, you were 18 years of age, is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
So I have, and my board members with me have your packet of information. We have offense reports. We have a lot of information about your case. But what I'd like to ask you to do is just briefly explain to the board what happened on the date that the victim was killed.
Yes, ma'am. The high school that I had went to, it was their homecoming football game. A friend of mine who we played together, he was playing on the team. After the game, we went to a bar to shoot pool and throw some darts. While I was there, I had gotten to a verbal altercation with Brett Kreller. One thing led to another, and we changed locations. And when we went to the next place, we wound up getting into a physical fight, fist fight. And somebody came out the house with a bat, actually hit me with the bat. When I got struck with the bat, I saw my gun on the ground and I grabbed it and I fired one time. And tragically, that act was responsible for taking Mr. Kreller's life. Mm-hmm. It is something that has caused a great deal of pain to his family. And for that, I'm terrible.
So let me just backtrack. You had been at a bar?
Yes, ma'am.
And how were you able to get into a bar at age 18?
Well, they let us go into bars at 18 in 94.
And had you consumed any alcoholic beverages?
I had a drink or two, but not too much, no, ma'am.
Or a drink or two of what?
Alcohol.
I know, but what kind of alcohol?
I had a pineapple and amaretto.
And you were there with a group of friends?
Yes, ma'am.
How many of you all were in your group?
I had 4 of us.
And did you know Mr. Kreller at the time of this incident?
I knew of him, but I didn't know him personally.
How did you know of him?
He was friends with another group of guys that I knew them, and his friends, the ones that I knew.
And how did the altercation at the bar begin? What led to a disagreement between you and Mr. Kreller at the bar?
Well, I'm not really sure, Miss Jackson. He came up to me and he started hollering some things at me. I started hollering some things back. And while we were there, we got kind of like separated. And like I said, we changed locations.
Well, let's talk about that. Someone at the bar, whether it's the bouncer or the bartender, asked both groups to leave. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
And so why didn't you just go home as opposed to going to this second location that you referenced?
I can only just tell you that I was dumb. I was hot-headed. And, like I say, we had a verbal disagreement, altercation, and we just went to another place to have a fight.
And how many people were with Mr. Preller?
At that time, he had one person with him.
There are 4 of you and 2 of them. And what was the second location?
I didn't know it at the time, but we went to someone else's house. I didn't know who the house was for. I followed him.
So y'all just followed him to the next location?
Yes, ma'am.
Intention of continuing the fight?
Yes, ma'am.
Why did you have a gun? How did you come in possession of a gun, and why did you bring it with you? Why did you take it out of the car?
I can only say that I was a young, dumb person, very, very naive. I can't explain to you why I owned a gun at all. I just chalk that up to being, again, just young, dumb, and being careless.
And so it's my understanding from reading the accounts, when you got to that second location, you and your friends started to fight Mr. Preller and the person with him. Someone came out of the house where you all congregated and had a baseball bat. Perhaps there were 2 people who came out of that residence and there were baseball bats involved. And you were struck with the bat, and then you picked up the gun, and Mr. Preller was shot in the head. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And you are the person who fired the shot. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Well, let's talk about 18-year-old Mr. Silva. Were you still in high school? Had you graduated from high school? I think I showed that you had dropped to the 11th grade. Is that correct? Did you drop
Yes,
out
ma'am.
of 11th grade? And why did you end up dropping out of high school in the 11th grade?
I was just wild. I had no aim or ambition in life. My grades were poor in school, and I was just out of control.
And why do you think that was?
I couldn't put a finger on that, Miss Jackson. I can say that, I didn't have direction. I watched the wrong type of things on television. I listened to the wrong kind of music, and I just was just not a very, very smart individual.
What about you were drinking at 18? What about drug use?
Yes, ma'am. I use drugs too.
Did you start using drugs?
I was probably about 15 years old.
And what kind of drugs were you involved with?
I smoked marijuana, and from time to time I snort cocaine.
Okay. What about LSD?
Yes, ma'am. I had tried LSD before too.
And at 15 years old, how did you come in contact with all this drug use?
I surrounded myself around the wrong sorts of people. And I was introduced to some drugs by my father also.
Explain that to us.
Well, Dad, he was young, and he introduced me to smoking weed and trying LSD.
Well, how were you when that happened?
I was 15 years old when we started smoking weed together. Right at about 15.
Were your parents together?
No, ma'am. My parents got divorced when I was about 4 years old.
And so you would have visits with your dad and your dad introduced you to smoking marijuana?
Yes, ma'am.
After dropping out of high school, were you employed?
I was employed temporarily.
Kind of
With-
work?
I used to wash cars and detail cars at my uncle's car lot. And that's the main thing that I used to do to make money.
Well, let's move forward to, I see that at one point you had been indicted for manslaughter. That was in 1994. You were initially indicted for manslaughter, but then they came back and indicted you for murder. Do you have any knowledge of why charge was upgraded from manslaughter to second-degree murder?
Yes, ma'am. I believe that some of Mr. Creller's friends told the police that I had been threatening to kill him prior to the time that this tragedy took place.
Is that true?
No, ma'am. That's not true.
All right, well, let's talk about your time since you've been incarcerated. I show that your risk assessment is low. You have a good institutional record. You've been a Class A trustee now for 8 years.
Yes, ma'am.
And your current job is as a groundskeeper. Is that correct?
I'm the recreation orderly at Camp D. I'm responsible for organizing all the sporting activities within the camp.
We'll talk about that, okay? But
Okay, all right.
on your prison record, it shows your job as groundskeeper.
Okay.
Is that just kind of a general term to cover what you do in the recreational department? I'm just trying to get an understanding.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
I show that you've taken some programming, you've taken Cage Your Rage. So was anger, as you look back, was anger an issue for you?
Yes, ma'am.
Tell us about that.
The earliest memories of my life were of my mother and father fighting, physically fighting. That's the first things that I remember of being a little child. And the fighting continued most of my childhood years. When my mother remarried, she remarried to a man who was an alcoholic and a drug addict. And I found him from time to time beating on my mother. And this affected me tremendously. At the time, I wasn't aware of what it did to me, but after learning things and taking different programs and evaluating myself, I realized that a lot of times I would just mimic what I saw as a child.
So how did anger management, Cage Your Rage, specifically help you understand and cope with anger issues?
It afforded me the knowledge to be able to think before you act, to critically analyze a situation, and just not act upon something just because your instincts or your impulses would lead you in that direction. That was the biggest thing Cage Your Rage did for me.
What, given what you told us about your drug and alcohol use, what programs have you taken to address your issues with substance abuse?
Well, I've taken substance abuse and transaction analysis, and I've attended numerous Alcoholics Anonymous meetings over the years.
Did you take Living in Balance?
No, ma'am. I'm not taking living imbalance.
I have it in my notes, so. So how do you, what makes you think that you've adequately addressed your issues with substance abuse? I mean, the Department of Corrections offers a number of substance abuse programs, and your programming in that area has been limited. So my question is, why don't you feel that you need or should have taken more programs specifically addressing substance abuse issues?
But I've taken the programs that have been available when I could. But the biggest thing that I learned about the substance abuse classes, I've been to different classes. By me having that substance abuse and transaction analysis certificate, they only have certain amounts of people of class space. So I would go in there and sit in on different classes and deal with different facilitators. I've actually helped certain groups with their facilitation of that. The number one thing is just knowing what your trigger points are.
What are yours?
And being
What are yours? What are yours?
My trigger points would have been, they are, being around the wrong people, putting myself in bad situations that I shouldn't be. Another thing is, the anger, feelings of rejection, which I now understand having to do with seeing all the fighting that I saw as a young child, in a way that I thought that was me being rejected, and it kind of carried it over. So those are trigger points. But the important thing about overcoming your trigger points is your safety nets and your safe havens, and knowing when to turn away and where you can go.
You have had 25 write-ups. The last 3 were in 2010, which was a Rule 4, 2012, a Rule 1, and 2013, another Rule 4. So it's been 10 years since your last disciplinary write-up. Tell us about the Rule 4s. What were they about? Do you remember?
I believe the Rule 4 was hanging clothes up during the daytime. Like, we're not supposed to hang clothes up before 3 o'clock to let them dry. So that's what they were for. I had, when I was working and I came in, I washed my shirt and hung it up to let it dry off some. And it was before the 3 o'clock window when we're allowed to hang our stuff up.
In 2012, you had a Rule 1, which is a contraband. What was that about?
I was a cell block orderly, serving the food and cleaning up the area, the living areas for the people on CCR and extended lockdown. We stayed down there till after our last meal, which means we wouldn't get off of work till after 4. So I had ran to the store to grab a few items, and I brought it back with me to my job site, and that was what the contraband was for. That's what he wrote me up for.
During the course of your incarceration, have you had any write-ups for intoxication or contraband that was illegal substances?
Yes, ma'am.
When was that?
There was about a 4.5 or 5 year window when I got several contraband charges.
And when was that window?
From 2004 to 2009.
And was your last intoxication or illegal drug contraband right up in 2009?
Yes, ma'am.
Now, I see that a lot of your programming has been directed towards becoming a certified personal trainer, certified in sports nutrition. Tell us why you concentrated in those particular areas.
I feel that physical fitness is very important into maintaining not only your physical health, but your mental health. And it's always been a passion of mine. And that's what I have used to spread good news of sobriety and living life in control to a myriad of people.
I see that you also have taken victim awareness.
Yes, ma'am.
About that, tell us what you learned in victim awareness.
Victims awareness was a very impactful and powerful course. It's taught me to have empathy, and that my actions don't just affect me, but it affects other people, where it might not be just the person, but the people that are connected with that individual. And I thought victims awareness was, of all the programs I've taken, that is the one that's had a profound effect on my life.
And in what way has your life been changed as a result of taking victim awareness?
It makes me think of other people before I take an action or before I do anything. Whereas, and there was a time in my life where I would just do whatever I felt like doing. But now, if it's something just as simple as turning a fan on, I'll ask other people around me, "Hey, is it all right to turn the fan on?" Just because we don't know how our actions affects others, and that's the thing that's just really stuck with me over time.
What is moral compass?
Oh, Moral Compass was a wonderful course also. It taught me what I've been for a long time as a layman mentor, where I might not have the certification or the accolades to say, "Hey, he's a mentor," but it's so important to pour goodness into the lives of others. And when you've been through a lot and they have young people they don't really know what they're facing, they need someone that they can talk to, someone that they can trust. And that Moral Compass has taught me so much on what I've been doing over the years, and given me even more so.
You've also been involved in a number of faith-based programs. Tell us some of those programs and why you chose to become involved in them.
Well, I gave my life to Jesus Christ in 2010. I got baptized, and I believe that he is my rock. And so long as I stand on him, I shall never fall. And all of these courses I've taken, they've helped build me. They've helped edify me to turn me into the man that I am now. I have preached. I've been the head pastor for the Cell Block Ministry from 2016 all the way until the time the pandemic hit. Just recently, we started back that ministry again. I've taught numerous Bible studies and preached sermons over the years. And whenever they have outside guests come to be a part of our church group, I always help them in any way, shape, or form that I'm needed. So this is the faith-based courses, and becoming a Christian have just been a tremendous blessing into my life. And I am a bedrock in our community there at Camp D. At the House of Deliverance Church.
There's a lot of victim impact statements. A lot of people have been hurt, harmed by the loss of Mr. Crowley. Obviously, his parents, his siblings, his uncles, his aunts, his cousins, and just a host of just family friends. So what would you say to them today? What would you like to say to them at this moment?
To everyone whose lives I've affected, there are no words to say. Sometimes words can be shells or superficial. We have a song that we sing in church where we say we couldn't praise God enough if we had 10,000 tongues. And to everyone who I've impacted, I could not apologize to you all enough if I had 10,000 tongues. My actions were senseless, they were reckless, and I had no regard whatsoever for what I did. And if I told you I'm sorry 10,000 times, it wouldn't be good enough. I apologize from the bottom of my heart, and I'm full of sorrow for what I've done to you all.
You also have a number of letters of support from Mr. Jay Batts, who's the past chairman of the Board of Crime Stoppers. You have a letter from Warden Benoit, from Nicholas Sanders, Assistant Wardens. You have multiple letters of support from family and friends. But I think the ones that are most insightful for me are the letters written by inmates and people in the prison who have worked around you and with you. And I'd like to just mention, mention a couple of them. One of the letters is from Daryl Williams, who was in the camp. He was a Camp D education clerk, and he writes, a year and a half ago, I approached Mr. Silver for his advice on how I should handle a personal and delicate situation with an offender in my dormitory. I needed to talk with someone I trust, so I turned to Mr. Silva. After informing Mr. Silva of my issue with this offender, Mr. Silva then went and spoke to this person. And after doing so, Mr. Silva called us both into a private area of the recreation yard, whereby using his diplomacy convinced this offender of his misguided ways. After that little meeting, my problem with that offender was solved. I retired from government work back in 1999 after 32 years of public service. He said, under my supervision, I had to men and women of whom had many years of experience in the building and permitting industry. I have witnessed some very good leaders and some not so good in my 72 years on the earth. In my eye and in my mind, Mr. Silva would be placed as one of those at the top of my list as an outstanding leader of men and a prime example for others to follow. So tell me about your, I don't want to get into the specifics, but just tell me some of the ways that you have mentored to or helped other inmates.
When people have issues that they're dealing with in their lives, be it with their cases, the amount of time that they have, or battling addiction, they come to me. I have become a safety net and a safe haven for many people across the different spectrums of life which we deal with here in prison. If it's a private situation between just one guy and what he's dealing with, I'll share with him the experiences I've had in my life. and I'll impart wisdom for him. A situation like Mr. Williams, where it's another guy, I'll just be like the mediator and let them talk it out and just show both parties, getting to see from the other side's point of view. And like I said earlier, that in life, it's about how you live, not about what you say. And I try to pour goodness into people in any opportunity that I can. And they know that my door is always open whenever they need help.
Warden, can you tell us about Mr. Silva?
Just a clarification, currently he is a minimum B as far as his trustee status. He's had that since 2017. You know, I look back at his record and probably substance abuse, any CTRP courses as far as living in balance. One thing that I did see in here is that back in 98 and in 2000, where he was kind of in and out of the blocks, when they're in the cell blocks, they don't have access to programming, but he does have certificates. So at those times when he was out of the blocks, he was searching and getting something related to his substance abuse. I did notice that in looking at him. He has been a recreational orderly since 2016 at Camp D. In addition to the other outside of his work, his ministering and the other things that he's done. You know, last write-up, 2013, we've not had any problems.
Thank you, Warden. Mr. Chairman, that's all I have.
Thank you very much, Ms. Jackson. Mr. Freeman has a question.
Yeah, I have one question for you, Mr. Silva. Were you a gang member?
No, sir.
Did you have any affiliation with the Latin King?
No, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you. Now we'll hear from your supporters. Mr. Packy Thompson.
Yes, sir. I'm Patrick Thompson. I pastor Bayou Blue Assembly of God Church in Houma, Louisiana. I've been going to Camp D for about 12 years, ministering in the church there. Had a chance to know Luke. I've watched him interact with the other inmates. I've seen the respect that a lot of them have for him because of his work in the lockdown area that he goes and spends time with those guys. Luke has become a friend as we've spent time together and talked with each other. Of course, you know, as a pastor, I get a chance to interact with that team, and he's worked real close with Brother Michael Houston, who's the pastor of the Deliverance Church and kind of was running things there. I've watched him, like I said, and I've watched him interact with other inmates. And it's, you know, it's when you see the other inmates shows him respect and ask him questions, they come in as we would sit down and ask him, hey, you know, I've got this going on. What do you think I can do? And Luke gives some pretty solid advice. And so I just think that, you know, we're talking about a man that's been incarcerated for quite some time. You know, and it appears to me that he has taken advantage of the time that he's been there to better himself and to try to be a positive part of the community that he's in. And it appears to me that he's been successful.
Thank you very much. So appreciate you. White? Yes, ma'am.
It's Lori White now, retired from judging in fact.
All right.
Here on behalf of Luke Evans, as someone who's known him for more than 20 years, started out as Luke's lawyer. And back when I was representing him, Luke was still full of, I can't think of another term except misdemeanor. And he was young. He was, his mindset was still thinking this was all self-defense. Luke was never in a position where he thought that he didn't do something terrible. Luke has always accepted responsibility, and it was the intent of his case, when I started the case back 16 to 20 years ago, that it would be a manslaughter, and that Luke would have a 40-year sentence, and that Luke would come home sometime after that. What Luke does not have in good sense at that young age, he had in support from other family members, and you can see he still has an incredible support. I have visiting his grandfather, the namesake of Ricardo Silva, and his aunt, who's here, as well as his mother, who has been a staunch supporter of him all these years. His father is here with him. He has a sister and everyone. I've never seen family support like Luke has. And the fact that Luke has matured into someone is the reason that I'm, and the person that he's matured into is the reason that I am here today. I'm not here as a paid advocate. I'm not here as his lawyer. I'm here as an actual witness, because I've retired, I'm able to do that. You all may know that I started the first reentry court in Louisiana. So I'm aware of what it takes for people to make it when they get out of jail. And I'm here to tell you that I think that Luke can do it and will do it. And I don't think that he is not worth your risk. I also will offer, if the Preller family does not ever want him in that parish, my husband and I have a 50-acre farm, and I would offer Luke to live on our farm, while he also takes reentry classes and works with the Bureau project. Luke is matured. I don't believe Luke, because he did not have a prior criminal history. I do not think that Luke will be a risk and return to the criminal life. I do not think that Liz will return to any type of drug use, even when he has the ability to obtain it. She's had to be in jail to obtain it. As I'm aware, sadly, they still can use it in jail. Luke has a perspective and thought processes that have taken him outside of confinement, which is something that in the success cases that I have had, one of those being Morris Henderson, who was here, was also my client. Morris is someone in the community that has done great things. And I've been able to identify from 16 years of being a judge and watching the people that are successes versus not successes. And Luke is someone that I would expect him to always be a success. You know, I was never the kind of lawyer, never the kind of judge that ever thought that someone was innocent, except for one case in which DNA exonerated them. And I actually thought that client was guilty and was surprised that DNA exonerated them. So it's not like anyone can ever say what someone will not do or what someone will do, but his risk is extremely low. And I hope he'll be given a chance. His case started out as manslaughter. It was upped. The family, these are lovely families. Luke is a product of bad raising, but love from people that stayed with him and never left him once he was in this. And that has carried him through these years and made him think, what will life be? And he still has hopes and dreams. And I hope that you all will give him that opportunity that he never had in his case, in which he could have pled guilty to a manslaughter. And I feel like the case was a manslaughter. That's what we always argue for. Not people's not. So I ask this board to please give him a recommendation.
Thank you very much. Now we'll hear from Miss Cynthia Burbovich.
Good morning. My name is Cynthia Burbovich, and I'm Luke Silva's mom. First, I'd like to apologize to the Preller family for all the pain that has been caused. And I can't tell you how sorry I truly am. I would like to thank the board for allowing me to speak on my son Luke's behalf today. Luke had a difficult childhood, as you've heard. I made poor choices in marriages, and he and I were both victims of physical and mental abuse. There's nothing I can do to change that for him. I did, of course, move on from those two fellas, and I have a wonderful husband now. I've been married to for 15 years. We have a home for him. My brother has a job for him, and this whole family is here to support him. Luke walks with Christ. He is reformed. He is sorrowful. He's loving. He's giving. He's caring. He's passionate. He spent 27 years here. I feel like he has reformed, and I really believe that if he were able to come home, he could change so many other lives out here with his vision and with his Christianity, that he just has changed so many hearts. As a matter of fact, there was a man that came to our car lot one day, and he told my brother, he said, I'm looking for a car. I just got out of Angola. And my brother said, Cindy, this guy was in Angola. And I said, hey, do you know my son Luke? He says, I sure do. He used to preach down in the cell block when I was there, and his sermons were so powerful, the hair would stand up on my neck. So that speaks volumes. He's changed me. He's taught me so much. I'm sorry. There's not much more I can say, except I beg for your mercy to please let him come home.
Thank you very much, Ben. We appreciate it.
Anytime.
Thank you. Now we'll hear from the opposition, hear from Mr. James Kreller. Victor?
Excuse me. Anybody that's lost a son, anybody, knows how it's. It's a terrible thing. People talk about wishes and things that people can do. We have things we wish my son could have done. That will never be allowed. He's missing every day. We love him. And I'm sorry for my actions right now. But it's something that will never go away. No matter what happens, I'll never be able to give him a hug, tell him well. Didn't think I would be here talking like this. I thought I'd be much stronger, so I apologize. Sad thing is, the one thing that will never change in my mind, that the person we're here for will always be a convicted murder. I'm sorry to say that, but that's a fact. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Jamie Meyer?
My name's Jamie Meyer, and I'm Brett Creller's little sister. He was 3 years older than me. In 1994, we were just getting to the age where we were becoming friends instead of just siblings. We had a great childhood. We played together a lot, but we were able to start doing things together. I was in the Dominican. Fred had just graduated from Jesuit, and it was a fun summer for us. He included me in things that he did, and we got to hang out more as friends. And even though he was getting ready to go away to college, I was excited about his opportunities. He came home from college and said that he wasn't going back. And I was excited because my friend was back, my brother. So on November 4th, 1994, he was going out with his friends. And I remember laying on the living room floor watching TV when he left. Little did I know, my whole world changed that night. I remember that night like it was yesterday. I was woken up by his friend beating on my front door telling me that something happened. So when I went to go get my parents, they weren't there. I knew something had to be really wrong. Wayne and I got the phone book out and started calling around the hospitals. And when my parents walked back in the house, they didn't even have to speak. I knew it was bad. Later on, we found out that as our family changed forever, that the defendant went home and climbed in his bed. And that's where the police found him. As a family unit, we are close. We play together, we eat together, we love each other big. On November 4th, our family changed. We are all grieving in our own way. Each of us changed that day, both mentally and emotionally. But we vowed to take care of each other no matter what. We realized we needed to love each other bigger. We still deal in our own way. As for me, I went to counseling for a while, and I also asked God for help. I can tell you that anyone who knows me today knows of Brett, because I speak of him often, and I think of him even more. I was 15 years old and my sister 12 when the trial began. We were sitting in the hallway at the court before it started one day, and when the defendant walked through, he barked at us like a dog. As time went on, I came to realize it was to intimidate us, but it didn't work. He was convicted of second-degree murder for killing Brett. Oof, the judicial system came through for us. It was all over, or so I thought. Then the phone call started. Back to court for this appeal, back to court for that appeal. The phone call that his sentence was overturned, and then that was overturned. I realized after many years of this that it will never be over. We have a life sentence too. It's trying, to say the least. But with the grace of God and each other, we will be through it again and again and again. I, Jamie Meyer, Brett's little sister, am a fighter. And I will continue fighting for him until my dying day. He doesn't get any opportunities to be different or reintroduced into society. All of those rights were taken from him that day. So please continue to hold his murderer accountable for what he did. And thank you for hearing us.
Thank you very much.
I also have a statement from my mother, Kate Preller, if I can briefly.
Ma'am, we really have a lot of people to speak. We've read all the information that we submitted to you.
Okay, thank you.
We'll hear from Ms. Stacy Virginia.
Morning, my name is Stacy Dejany, and I'm the youngest sister of Brett. Thank you for giving my family the opportunity to speak our piece. My brother was one of a kind. He was kind, smart, funny, and loved to play jokes on people. He was a guy that you could count on when you needed him and would give the shirt off his back for just about anyone. Anyone that had the opportunity to meet him was blessed to have him in their life. On November 4th, 1994, all opportunities that he would have in life were taken away by Luke, a coward who took a gun to a fist fight, then went home and went to sleep with no remorse. Brett lost the opportunity to continue being an amazing son, an amazing brother, and an amazing friend. He lost the opportunity to go to college and start a career to support the family that he wanted to have. He lost the opportunity to meet his brothers-in-law, his niece, and many other family members to come. He lost the opportunity to live a full life that he so much enjoyed and looked forward to many more years to come. Today we're here because Luke wants the opportunity to be set free from the choice that he made to take a life. The opportunity to continue his life as a son, a sibling, and a friend. My question is why? Why does he get this opportunity when he made a choice to take away all opportunities from Brett and so many opportunities from his family and friends? Why does he get the opportunity to walk the street as a free man when we are still living in hell every day? Our lives were completely destroyed on that night, and we still suffer every day. Why does he get the opportunity to live free from any more consequences? He was convicted of second-degree murder and was sentenced to life in prison with no chance of parole. Why does he get the opportunity and we don't? I sincerely hope that my family can continue to believe in the system and keep him where he belongs. But if he is set free, I pray hard to God that history does not repeat itself and give him the opportunity to take another life and destroy more families. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, ma'am. Appreciate your comments. Mr. Randy Myers.
Morning, Randy Myers, Assistant DA. We are strongly opposed to Mr. Silva's request for commutation of the sentence. First, we need to look at the crime and look at what Mr. Silva has said about that. They try to maintain that this was a manslaughter, but what the facts show at trial was that, and when he testified, when he stated here today, that he followed Brett to this other location, and he brought it up. He testified at trial that, I'll read from the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeal again, that he knocked to the ground with a baseball bat, picked up his gun off the ground, which he said here, raised it above his head and fired. It was a warning shot that somebody didn't come bash his head in. What the evidence showed at trial was that Brett was shot right here. And the forensic evidence was not that the bullet went up, the bullet was going down. There was also stripling on the forehead, which indicates that the shot, the gun was 12 to 18 inches from his head on a downward track. That's not firing on one shot in the air. Suggests that Mr. Silva's not being honest about that. And that is the first step in rehabilitation, being honest with yourself, being honest about the facts, being honest about what you did. Another thing he testified on, he stated here today, which he testified at trial, he did not know Brett. There was, one more thing when the time of crime, there were two neighbors who witnessed the crime from inside their house. They testified that the two men were standing face to face when Silva shot Brett in the head. But laying on the ground, shooting his head. The other testimony that came forward at trial, Mr. Silva has stated that he didn't know. He knew of Brett, he didn't know. But there was testimony that over a 2-year period, there were 4 instances in when they met, and they had some altercations, some words back and forth. State's evidence said that Silva threatened him. Mr. Silva's friends agreed. They said that they agreed on the 4 encounters over the 2-year period. Now, there was a dispute as to whether Brett was the aggressor in making comments towards Silva or vice versa. But he knew him for over 2 years, which is contrary to what he states here before this movie. So what has he done since he's been incarcerated? What has he done to rehabilitate himself? That's the next thing that we need. The very limited programs. When you look at the certificates that he's had, the vast majority of the certificates are long ago. The progress report in the record indicates that he needs anger management. Now, he took anger management, but it was many years ago. He didn't continue with that. I believe in 2005 is when he took the anger management. Clearly, he had a substance abuse and still has, he always has substance abuse, but he's admitted to using drugs and alcohol since he was 16 years old. And after Ms. Jackson questioned him a little bit more concerning drugs that he used, he admitted to using LSD as well. He took substance abuse. He says he took transactional analysis, substance abuse. So that was in 2000. It's interesting that from 2004 to 2009, he had a number of write-ups dealing with substances. That he had contraband in prison and was using drugs apparently during those time periods after the substance abuse treatment that he had taken. He says he did AA over the years. You know, we see a lot of inmates who take AA, NA, and they get certificates, and they take 12 steps, and they get these certificates. And every year, they may have certificates showing that they're doing these programs and taking these programs. There are no such certificates in Mr. Silva's record. The warden had said he can only, you know, he's in the cell block. And during the time he was in the cell block, which I think it was in that period around 2000, but at least since the last, he's been a trustee for the last 7 years. So the last 7 years, he hasn't been in the cell block. And any program would be available to him. He hasn't taken programs. He hasn't taken any substance abuse programs. He has taken very limited amount of programs. Most of the programs he's taken recently have all been faith-based programs. Nothing with regard to any kind of vocational rehabilitation, no substance abuse, no anger management. I think that's telling, and that he clearly has not been rehabilitated, and this is a good candidate for a commutation. Finally, he's only served 29 life sentence, 29 years of life sentence. So for those reasons and the fact they're very, very strong victim opposition, we are strongly opposed.
Thank you, Mr. Myers. Appreciate your comments. Mr. Silva, is there anything you'd like to say before we turn it over to Ms. Hogan?
Yes, sir. To everyone whose lives I have ruined and destroyed, I'm terribly sorry from the bottom of my heart. Again, I could live the rest of my life and it wouldn't be good enough to say how full of sorrow I am for what I've done to you all. And I'll be eternally sorry forever. And to this board, I would like to thank you for the opportunity for allowing me to come here this day and say these things to you all. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Silva. Ms. Hogan?
Thank you, Mr. Marabella. Luke Silva is the first person to say that he needed to come to prison. He's not proud of who he was at the age of 18. He was wild, he was out of control. There's no excuse for the things that he did. And there's also proof that even with a life sentence, Mr. Silva took opportunities to change as they became available. Had he been 4 months younger, he would potentially have parole eligibility after serving 25 years of his life sentence. We know that juveniles possess a great potential for rehabilitation. That's why we have Act 277. So even though Mr. Silva is not Act 277 eligible, he nonetheless shows the same type of rehabilitation and maturity over the years, the natural maturity and rehabilitation. And I agree with Ms. Jackson that the letters that I find the most impactful within Mr. Silva's packet are the letters from people that are around him every day, not just Mr. Williams, but there are other people that write that Luke inspired them to get out of the cell blocks through his cell block ministry. Luke was the inspiration to stop using drugs, to come out of the cell blocks. He has dedicated himself to fitness and to recreation, and he uses his skills in both of those areas to be relatable to younger people, to older people, to people from all different walks of life. Luke is also on the CPR team. He helps revive people, or he's always on the lookout for people that might need water or show. Just the other day, I was up here looking through an Anglite magazine, and there's a picture of Luke passing out waters and snacks at a seniors bingo event. He's active in his community. He's there in every way that is ever asked of him. He volunteers. There's also a letter from Assistant Warden Sanders that describes Luke as a pillar of the Camp D community. And there's a letter from former Warden Vinoy in which there was a female correctional officer that was about to get attacked by another inmate, and Luke stopped that attack from happening. These are all proof of rehabilitation, and it's a genuine rehabilitation. Luke has tremendous family support. If he is granted release, he has the support of the Louisiana Parole Project. They can immediately do a substance abuse evaluation on him. They can link him with substance abuse programming as needed, with a sponsor. And for all of these reasons, we'd ask this board to recognize the profound rehabilitation that is evident in this case and to grant.
Thank you, Ms. Hogan. Appreciate your comments. Can't wait to vote. Ms. Jackson.
First, let me say to the Brower family and to everyone who spoke today, we appreciate your input, we appreciate your comments. It helps to inform our decisions. This is a hard case, but they're all hard. They're all hard because there's pain and loss in every case. And then there's redemption, sometimes not. But these cases are very difficult. And I don't take it lightly, and anybody on this panel takes it lightly, because we know while we can't experience your pain, we know that your pain is real. Very evident in your comments today. And I want to thank you, and I want you to know that I have listened and I have heard. But I'm going to offer you something. I hope you'll receive it. Forgiveness is not for the offender. It's not for you. It's for you. And while your pain and your loss will never go away, anger and bitterness can go away. And you need not be held captive by those emotions. And I say that with all sincerity. And I hope you'll take it to heart. Our job is to look at everything. And of course, we look at the facts. The impacts, the victims and other people. But we're also tasked with looking at who the offender is today. In your minds, he will forever be that person who took your loved one. In your mind, he will ever be that 18-year-old who acted horrible. And I understand that. But Mr. Silva has grown up in prison. He was 18 when this crime occurred. And at 18, you're not the same person as you are at 47. And he has grown up in prison, and he has grown up well in prison. And I agree with Ms. Hogan when she says prison has probably been the best thing for you. And it's demonstrated by the way that he has conducted himself over the last 47 years. And again, I see a lot of cases, and I see a lot of people who claim to be rehabilitated. You know, the first words out of their mouth is, I am a rehabilitated man. But what I look at is not what the offender says about himself, but I look at what those around him say about him. And I can't tell you that I didn't mention all the letters, but he has had a tremendously positive impact on the lives of everybody that has come to know him. When a free person who is the Camp D education for comes to him and says, I have a problem with this inmate, I don't know how to handle it. And they come to another inmate, and that inmate goes to the offending inmate and makes him see is wrong, and then is able to resolve the situation in a diplomatic way. That shows he's grown up and he's accomplished what incarceration, one of the goals of incarceration is, and that is rehabilitation. Warden's comments, the past warden's comments, everybody who has worked with him in any capacity have indicated that this is not the same person that he was at 18. And I was a judge for 28 years, and I've heard a lot of stuff. I'm pretty good at figuring out BS. I was known for that. But the flip side of that is I can also figure out what's real, what's genuine. And I believe that Mr. Silva's rehabilitation change is real and it's genuine. And for those reasons, I believe that it would be appropriate to recommend to the governor commutation of sentence to 75 years based on his outstanding work within the prison and his growth and his maturity. That would be my recommendation, Jim.
Thank you, Ms. Jackson. Mr. Freeman?
Okay, it is very, very difficult to understand. You know, Mr. Silva, it sounds like that y'all were the two big boys on the block and wanted to see who was the baddest. But I mean, the baddest would have been a lot better done with the fist and not a gun. There was several witnesses that say that there was a baseball bat involved and all of that. And the testimony shows that, the shot was not to warn people. I mean, the shot was to hit somebody. But as Ms. Jackson stated, you have done a lot. So today, my vote will also be to commute to 75 years. I know this isn't a parole hearing, but I won't, since this may not come back before us, no contact with the victim's family and electronic monitoring. If you get anywhere near that victim's family, you will be sent back to prison.
Thank you, Mr. Freeman. Mr. Rocha?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First of all, I would like to thank the victim's family. To make a trip, Baton Rouge, and appear before this board takes courage, fortitude, and integrity. And I want to thank you. The victim is always a part of this process. It's stated in our mission statement. Be part of the process, very important. But Mr. Silva was 18 years old when he committed this crime. And my job as a board member is to look for maturity and rehabilitation. Mr. Silva has not had a write-up in over 10 years. He has performed community service, and by the letters we received from former offenders, he has aided and assisted the staff in helping others to become rehabilitated. He has taken sufficient number of programs, and I think
He has matured to the point where he is able to recognize his terrible mistakes 29 years ago. And I don't think he's going to make those mistakes again. Angola can still hear us, but we temporarily lost video with Angola, but they can hear, so I will continue. And our job is to look at those things, evaluate it, but more important, our job is to see who Mr. Silva is today. And would he be a public safety risk? I don't think so. So my vote is to commute to 75 years. And hopefully Mr. Silva will come before the parole board, and then we will make the decision on whether or not he will be released or not.
Thank you, Mr. Rocha. I'd also like to thank everyone who appeared here today, the courage and grief that you've shown. It's certainly understandable. We all we don't know what you're going to hear. You appreciate you. I'd also like to thank the supporters as well for Mr. Silva. I've been in the criminal justice system for 50 years. These cases don't get easy. Every day they're hard and painful. We see the pain of everybody that's involved in this case, especially the family victim. But without going into all of the things my colleagues have said, I agree with you. My vote today would like to recommend the governor to commute the sentence to 75 years. So, Mr. Silva, if you can hear us still there, the parole board has voted, the pardon board has voted in favor of recommending to the governor that your sentence be commuted to 75 years.
Thank you very much. Appreciate you.
Thank you.
Okay, so let's unpack this. What I have is the court document. I think it'll be helpful to go over this because what's important for me is to find out, hey, is this like actually a second degree charge that you would get life without the possibility of parole for, or is it manslaughter? You know, the way that he described the fight was that he was in a bar. He was confronted by the victim. Then they went to go to their house to fight. And then all of a sudden he was hit by a bat and he shot his gun in the ear for a warning shot. And that resulted in the death. And then we hear different things from Randy Meyer, how the gun was close to his head and that it wasn't that way. He brought a gun to a fist fight, was losing and took it out. And, you know, so I think going into the court documents will help us get some information. And thank you, Richard, for providing it. Now, I skipped down about 3 paragraphs before I start reading it to you. And that's because there is an address, even though the address is something like 30 years old and the person probably no longer lives there. It was one of the people involved's grandmother, but YouTube will strike you if you list an address, and I don't understand the rules enough of it, so I'm just not risking it. 3 strikes, by the way, and they shut your channel down. That's it. There's nothing you can do about it. So I'll sleep better at night to not go through it and not try to blur it. And I'll just tell you what it says. Now, what it says is that he went to the bar, like you said, with 3 of his friends. Now, the victim, Brett, was also at the bar with either was a girlfriend or a female acquaintance, Barry. Barry in the bar went to go take a phone call. Remember when it was, you had the pay phones. And when she's at the phone, Luke went up to her and called her the 4-letter S word and the 4-letter B word. So Brett, said, "What are you doing?" more or less. And, "What are you calling her that for?" It was like totally out of nowhere. She's on the phone. And they got into it. But then they cooled down, and it was like 2 hours later of drinking. And when they went into the parking lot, he tests, you have then different, you have the defense witnesses and you have Barry's witnesses, the girl, where they kind of say different things. One says that Luke was really drunk. The other says that Brett was really drunk, but they got into confrontation in the parking lot. And at that point they said, okay, let's go and fight it out. Now, just to point out, this is a court transcript, and this is very different than what Luke said. Luke said, I don't remember what happened. He got into my face, but that's not what it says here. Now they get to the house, and it's the grandmother's house, but they start fighting one-on-one. Luke and Brett, who's the victim. And Brett is winning the fight. Brett is kicking Luke's butt. And at that point, Luke's 3 other friends jump in. So now it's a 4-on-1. It's an unfair fight because they're just, a bunch of real tough guys. And they are now beating up Brett, of course. And that's when David came out of his grandmother's house with the bat to go and protect his friends. He saw 4 people beating up his friend. He saw his friend in a headlock. They were kicking him in the face. So he runs up with the bat and he hits Luke under the arm, not in the head, he hits Luke under the arm. Now, anything could be he meant to hit him in the head, miss, who knows, right? But that's the fact of this case. And then he runs with the bat and chases the other 3 people into the street. Not Luke. Luke isn't being chased by the bat. Luke then takes the gun and shoots not at the guy with the bat, but he shoots at the guy who was just embarrassed him in front of all his friends and was kicking his butt, Brett, and he shoots him in the head. So that's the information that at least the prosecution brings to the story. And that is very different than what we just heard, and very different than manslaughter. Forget bringing a gun to a fist fight, but but now they're going to bring up different perspectives of, well, it's in the chaos of battle, so to speak. It's dark. Maybe he didn't know who hit him with the bat. So, now we're going to move to reading of the transcripts. So after he pulled a .38 caliber out and shot, and the center of his forehead, he fell to the ground. Now Deputy David Short arrived at the scene within a minute after receiving a call over the police radio. It just took a minute. It's pretty amazing. He secured the scene, called for backup. Officers reporting the scene included Lieutenant Don English, Detective Alvin Wickbolt, and what cool names for detectives, Wickbolt and Don English, and then Detective Philip Raymond, Detective Ralph Sachs. They brought the whole team, including description of Silva and his car, an address where he might be located. At about 4:30 a.m. on November 4th, Raymond proceeded to Silva's father's house, and he spotted Silva's car in front of the premises. He called for uniformed backups. Luke Silva's father answered the door and told the officers that he was asleep in his house. So after all this, he went back home and went to sleep. Now, is it possible that, who knows, right? But yeah, they did mention at the hearing he was asleep in his bed. The officers went into the home. Well, they called him outside. They patted him down. They didn't find a weapon. They Mirandized him, took him to the detective, to the bureau. The father consented to allowing them to search the house, and they uncovered, and this is the same father who he blames on him drinking and also LSD, but Miss Jackson didn't seem to catch the LSD part. But he said, sure, search the house. They uncovered 6 firearms, all legally registered to Silva's father and grandfather. 4 of them were seized for testing, but not one of them were the weapon used. Then Luke gave 2 recorded statements on the morning of November 4th. Man, can you imagine? He claims he only had 2 drinks, like cocktails, which I don't believe either. Come on, really? You had just 2 drinks? Okay. I more imagine him waking up with this hangover, like, oh my God, at the detective's office. The first statement began at 5:48 a.m. and ended at 5:57. So that's just like 9-minute statement. In the statement, he admitted to participating in the fight after leaving the bar, but he did not admit to firing the gun. After the statement was complete, the detective told Silva he did not believe that Silva told the truth, and then he agreed to give a second statement. The classic detective move. I don't think you're telling me the truth, son. The second statement began at 6:35 a.m. In the second statement, he admitted to an altercation at the bar with a person he claimed he did not know. He further stated that he followed that person to a house where they fought. Silva stated that he had a rusty .38 caliber in his waistband of his pants, although he did not intend to use it. Well, dude, you don't bring a gunfight to a fist fight. Okay, so he said that the gun fell to the ground during the fight, and then a man hit him with the back. He picked up the gun, fired it into the ear. He stated that he did not intend to shoot anyone. He further stated that he left the scene by himself and threw the gun out the car window. After the statements, and you might say, would you really throw the gun away if you knew you didn't hit any, if you think you didn't hit anyone? After the statements were completed, he was formally arrested. The detective told him that he had discarded his gun. He told them where he discarded it, but they were never able to find it in the end. Now, here's what their appeal is. The state presented improper rebuttal evidence, which coupled with the trial's court refusal to permit, okay, let me just see where we go from here. Inconsistent testimony of the state witnesses does not support the verdict. Evidence of mitigating factors established sufficient to reduce red rum to manslaughter. And I don't say red rum in jest. I say it because of YouTube. I want to show you the doctor's statements. Well, here's interesting. 2 of the eyewitnesses produced by the state in this case were, let's see here. In this case were Christian, Alfonso, and David. Now David's the one with the bat. Can't recall who Christian was. Now defendant so David, who's the one with the bat, testified in the moments leading to the shooting. He found David had found the defendant in a headlock and was punching him. So he had him in a headlock and was punching him. Defendant and Kreller separated, and the defendant rose from the ground. The defendant raised his arm, although David did not notice whether there was anything in the defendant's hand. David turned his head to the right, then heard a shot fired. David dove to the ground, not realizing that Keller, the victim, Brett, had been shot. David did not actually see who fired the shot, thus he could not know if the defendant's exact position, precise moment the shot was fired. Christian testified that he saw the defendant fire the gun, and the defendant was facing Keller and was 2 feet away from him. Kreller's again, I'm using the first name and it's confusing me, but Brett, it was facing Brett, who was standing upright, and the defendant was more upright than crouched and was falling backwards when he fired the shot. So this is a state witness for the prosecution he says the defendant was facing Brett and was 2 feet away from him. Brett was standing upright and the defendant was more upright than crouched and was falling backwards when he fired the shot. That's a big difference if you're falling backwards. Alfonso saw the flash and ran. When the defendant fired, the weapon was at level of Alfonso's head and shoulders. Now, the state offered strong circumstantial evidence as the position of the defendant and the victim at the time of the shooting through testimony of Dr. Susan Garcia, the forensic pathologist who performed the autopsy on Brett Keller's body. Dr. Garcia testified during the state's case, and this might be one of the best witnesses that because I hate the idea of witnesses, because of expert witnesses, because you have the state and you have the defense, and they both bring expert witnesses that both say exactly what they're paid to say, and the entire thing is a mockery, in my opinion. Now, this is different. She performed the autopsy. You'd have to argue she's a third party, right? She's not. That's what I would like to believe, at least. At least as third party as it can get. Dr. Garcia testified during the state's case in chief that the track of the bullet, right to left, down and back, was inconsistent with the shot fired in the ear. The doctor also noted that the skin around the entrance wound contained stippling, which are the small round marks, that indicates that the gun was fired from a distance of about 12 to 18 inches, which is what Randy Meyer said, the DA. She noted that a randomly fired gunshot would not cause stippling. I mean, I don't know how you say that. You can randomly shoot, but whatever. Dr. Garcia's expert opinion was that the victim was either shorter or lower than the shooter, and that his head was beneath the muzzle of the gun. Which again that's not shooting in the air, that's... Now, the defendant's defense was justification or self-defense. He was saying it was justification or self-defense. He also alleged the mitigating factor of heat of blood. So witnesses for both the state and the defense testified that David hit the defendant with a baseball bat during the course of the fight. The defendant contends that he fired into the ear in order to warn David away from him. The defense suggested that the shooting was purely accidental. So the defense is saying, look, we have three defenses here. One, it was justifiable or self-defense, I don't know. Or it's like it's the heat of the battle and you're hit with the bat and he was scared. And it was an accident. Now, the defense witnesses, Jerry Watkins and Sean Pollen, testified that at the scene during the fight which initiated the shooting, however, neither Watkins nor Pollen saw the shot fired. Defense witness David Babin testified that when the shot was fired, he was fighting Alfonso on the sidewalk, so we did not see Kreller and the defendant at the crucial moment and was unable to testify as to the relative position. He did testify, however, that prior to the gunshots, he saw the defendant crouched on the ground with Brett Kreller leaning over the defendant and hitting him. So he testified that he saw Brett. Brett was now back on top of the defendant hitting him. Babin saw a blast go up in the ear as he ran to his car. So that's like a new perspective where it seems that he was back winning the fight now. The defendant was the only defense witness who testified to each position at the precise moment of the shooting. Defendant stated, so he took the stand. Defendant stated that a man hit him under the arm with a baseball bat, knocking him to the ground. We know that happened. The man looked as if he would strike the defendant again, so the defendant grabbed his gun. Defendant fired a warning shot because he was afraid the man would bash his brains out. But you fired the wrong, well, I guess, okay, with the bat. Defendant's testimony was that he pointed the gun up and backwards over his shoulder. So he's saying he pointed it up and backwards over his shoulder, which, okay. In his statement to the police, defendant said he pointed the gun up in the air. Defendant testified that Brett Keller was behind him when the gun went off. Defendant further stated that he only saw the man with the bat in front of him when he fired the gun, and he did not know. You know, if he had just taken an attorney and not said a single word, he might not have. This might not have ever gone to trial. Well, it probably would have still gone to trial, but you might say it wouldn't have been, you know, without that. An attorney, you know, obviously talking to the police, you never do it, especially if you're innocent. But prosecutors argued that their purpose is calling the rebuttal, and I'm not saying he's innocent. Just want to put that on the record. Prosecutors argued that the purpose in recalling the rebuttal witness was to impeach the defendant's testimony regarding the position and movement of the shooting. He's testified that he sits. And by the way, I know that this is kind of wordy and it goes on, and I don't do this to hear myself talk. I'm doing it to try to provide information. If you don't like it, let me know, because I can just give you a summary instead of reading it. But if you like it, then let me know that too. If you're still here listening to me say it, then it's probably not a good data point, but here's another witness, someone who's looked out a window. So they called 911. When she returned to the window, both she and Mr. Trosclair saw the flash of a gunshot, although it was dark. They cannot tell by the flash which individual had fired the gun. Trosclair both testified that the gunman was standing straight up, facing the victim. The victim was also standing up, and when he was shot, he immediately fell backwards. So according to this, also you would say impartial witness. It wasn't like an execution style thing. They're both standing up. Testified that the gunman was not aiming the gun backwards, neither anyone wielded a baseball bat. They're not great witnesses. So easy for, you know, how can you really remember, and it's dark and all that stuff. Now, the defendant contends that his defense was irreparable damage by Trosclair's testimony, that his right to defense was violated by the trial court's refusal to allow him to rebuttal. The defendant argues that the state improperly reserved part of its case in chief until all the defense is rested in order to prevent the defendant from response to the new evidence. Well, that is certainly interesting. How did they brought on a witness statement and didn't allow a rebuttal? That does seem sketch. How is that possible? How is that legal? What? Okay, attorneys, jump in and help me here. I'm not an attorney. We all know that. But that's part of the appeal. They did mention that there was court. Did he win the appeal? Let's see. The jurisprudence allows the state to bolster its case in chief through the use of rebuttal evidence. We do not find the trial judge abused his wide discretion under Article 7655 in denying the defendant opportunity for a rebuttal, where the defendant failed to indicate that he had any new evidence that he would provide during his rebuttal, and where the defendant cross-examined the rebuttal witness. By his second assignment, the defense argues that the state failed to prove that he had specific intent to kill Brett. The defendant contends that the evidence at trial showed that he had fired the gun out of sudden passion and heat. The defense argues that at most the facts adduced at trial support the verdict of manslaughter. Oh, here's what they were talking about. how they moved it from a manslaughter to homicide, and that is Mark, who knew both Silva and Kreller, testified that he had a party at his home in the fall of 1992. Among the guests were both friends of Brett, Marshall, Monica, and Clint. Silva and several of his friends arrived at the house in 2 cars. He asked the group to leave, and an argument ensued. The defendant threatened to put a cap in his friends, including Kreller, meaning that Silva would shoot them. Silva and his companions then left the premises. State witnesses, Mark, Marshall, Monica, and Clint, who also testified that they were present during this incident, and their description essential, testified Silva that his companion left. He said, "Oh, come on. This is not, if they use this as evidence that he intended to, that's ridiculous, in my opinion." There was another confrontation of the 2 groups in the summer of 93. But what we see is that there is constant confrontation, and he did tell the board that he didn't know him. So another dishonesty there. And does that mean he was coached, by the Pearl Project to lie? There's certain things you can get away with lying sometimes. Because it seems that they knew each other pretty clear in the evidence. Not friends, but they knew each other. Like Mr. Freeman said, they wanted to see who was the biggest man on the block, and he got his butt kicked and pulled a gun out because of it. Two groups engaged in heated verbal conversation. He came in the garage with a baseball bat and several other held pool sticks. At one point, they came to the house with a handgun. He pointed the gun at Mark's face, screaming that he was going to shoot. The clip fell out of Ingram's gun. Wow, this guy's a real brilliant. Mark's brother picked it up, and at some point, the defendant grabbed the gun, pointed it at other people. The group returned to Campbell's house, and Marshall and Monica testified essentially that the same manner with regards to the incident. Monica stated that the defendant had the gun and pointed it directly at Kreller and threatened to kill him. So they used this, and if he did point the gun directly at him and threaten, and then he does come back and shoots him, there's something there. And then there's a third incident. Whoa. This actually is pretty meaningful. If there are 3 incidences where this dude is pulling a weapon out and pointing it at people and threatening, that actually is a big deal. This wasn't like just a fight that just happened. This guy was really a loose cannon waiting to snap. I mean, he was about to join the army, and maybe he could have gotten his life together before it all happened, but he couldn't help himself. A third incident occurred in spring of 94, where he attended school which Silva had formerly attended. Marshall, Monica, it was a Jesuit high school for me, called during the lunch period and asked that Monica and Kreller meet them on the school grounds at dismissal time. They feared that Silva and some of his friends would attempt to attack them as they left school. After classes were dismissed, Silva and a black male identified as Lionel were on Ecole Classique grounds in Silva's car. Monica and Kreller were also there among their friends. Silva wore brass knuckles, and Lionel wore a glove with the metal bar across the knuckles. He testified during this incident that he saw Silva motion his waistband as if he had a gun, saw the form of a gun under his shirt, but did not see the gun itself. A verbal confrontation ensued in which Silva told Kreller. So Silva told Brett, the victim, "I'm going to kill you. I'm going to put a cap in your ass." Lionel shouted, "Who wants to get knocked out?" Teachers from Ecole intervened, and the situation was diffused. It looks like they're bringing up another situation. So, I mean, maybe it's interesting. I'm going on and on and on, but it was affirmed. So, affirmed, according to several state witnesses, they did know each other and they gained in confrontation several occasions. We know that the defense witness portrayed Brett and his friends as the aggressors in each of these incidents and denied that the defendant ever threatened Kreller, which is apparently not true. Lionel and Silva were coworkers, so. Hey, I again been here a long time, 27 minutes. I'm sorry. I think it comes down now. Do you think? I guess how do you feel? I mean, from reading all of that, it does clearly seem that they knew each other. He had threatened his life several times. In the hearing, he claims that he didn't drink anything. He can't remember why they got in a fight. He didn't know him, and that a bat was taken out and he shot in the ear. And when you look at I do always get upset when I hear people come up for commutation because it's insulting the family and it's insulting the entire situation. If he had come up and just owned it and said, I was an idiot. I was getting my butt kicked and I was afraid and I shot him. I was butthurt and I was scared and I shot him. It's a different thing than just getting up there and really changing, I think, the reality of what happened. And for those reasons, just hearing it, there's a fight, there's a bat, there's one shot. I would say, man, this isn't fair. He served 28 or 29 years, which is incredibly long time. We have seen people get out for doing much worse, serving less time. He was young. There was all those circumstantial situations, 11-1 jury verdict, expecting that maybe if this trial were to happen today, it would, he would never get a sentence like this, or maybe not even found guilty. But still, hearing him get up there and just kind of, it seems to me not, and maybe over time he convinced himself that that's the truth. But I just don't like that. What do you think? With that, I'll let you go.